Of the California Fire Science Seminar, sponsored by the UC Berkeley Fire Research Group and being organized by Michael Goldner at UC Berkeley and Crystal Colden at UC Merced, and myself, Janet Gobianillas, from UC Merced. Today, I am pleased, along with my co-host, to be hosting our speaker, Dr. Yufang Ying, from the University of California, Davis. Before we begin, I want to make a few announcements in order to clarify some logistics for today's seminar. The seminar talk will take place during the first hour of our seminar. During this hour, participants are able to ask questions through the Q&A box on Zoom. And please note that because of the webinar format of the meeting, microphone and video features are not available to participants. At the end of the talk, we will be going over the questions that we'll have on the Q&A. Following the seminar, we are hosting an extended discussion section, and a link to that meeting for the discussion will be posted on the chat, so watch out for that. The extended discussion is in a regular Zoom meeting format. So you'll have microphone and camera enabled for all participants. And there you're encouraged to ask questions, and open discussion is encouraged. This session is open to everyone. And we highly encourage students and early career faculty and professionals to attend. Without further delay, I will now introduce our speaker. Dr. Yufang Ying is an associate professor of remote sensing and ecosystem change at the Department of Land, Air, and Water Resources at UC Davis. Her research focuses on satellite remote sensing, ecosystem dynamics, and decision support for sustainable natural agriculture resource management. She's also interested in machine learning and AI for improved understanding of interactions between wildfire, vegetation, climate change, and human activities. Dr. Jin obtained her PhD in geography from Boston University and BS and MS degrees from Beijing University. Prior to her current position at UC Davis, she worked at UC Irvine and University of Maryland as a research scientist. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Yufang Ying. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeanette, for your great introduction and for giving me these opportunities to talk about our research on California's wildfires to a larger audience. Before I start my talk, I would like to thank my postdoc, Dr. Bin Chen, and my graduate students, Erica Scadudo, Yuhan Huang, who have done a lot of work on this topic. And I would also like to thank a lot of our collaborators throughout the year, like our colleagues from UC Irvine, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, pretty much most of the UC campuses, and the funding sources through NASA, UC Lab Fees, and California Strategic Growth Council. As we all know, fires are a very complicated problem or issues. It's right at the intersection of climate and ecosystems. And we heard a lot about how climate change, like warming or drying, has caused a lot of increase in fire activities, and also exacerbated by extreme weather. And there's another argument saying the fire management, right? Like past active fire suppression also caused the change in our ecosystems, allowing buildup of fuels and subsequently leading to recent changed fire regimes. And yeah, so like humans actually played a very critical role in our fire regimes. The question or the challenges we are facing right now is moving forward, how we can design effective management strategies to reduce the risk of future catastrophic fires, and to make sure our communities are adapted to this changing climate and also changing fire regimes. So to answer those questions, and we really need to understand how fire dynamics have been changing in the past? What are the patterns and what are the key drivers that led us to today's fire behaviors, right? So yeah, for today's talk, I'll cover 3 main pieces for wildfires, from the ignition probability to fire spread, and at the last, I'll cover some recent studies on fire severity. And yeah, so we are looking at wildfires in California from different angles, and some of these studies were done at state level. For example, ignition and ongoing work on fire spread. We are still trying to wrap up. So most of the results on these 2 pieces are still on the preliminary phase. And I will also introduce like more region-specific studies that we have published in Southern California in terms of fire behavior and consequences of different fire types from Santa Ana lenses. It's very relevant because as we speak right now, Southern California actually is experiencing 2 large fires, and Silverado fires, and what is the other fire? Yeah, I kind of forgot the name, but it's really a very scary scenario for this horrible fire season so far. And for fire severity, we're focusing more on the northern coastal intermountain areas. This area, we have seen lots of big fires since 2017, 18, and this year, like thousands of structures were destroyed by fires in Napa County. And we will put it more in the context of warming and drying impact on that fire severity study. So first, let's look at ignition, and we'll look at spatial patterns of ignition across the whole state and trying to understand what are the main factors that shaped these patterns of ignition across the state and how they vary across different regions. The main motivation is right now, there are some plans or thoughts about how we can reduce ignition probability because ignition is the first thing to start a fire. We really need to understand what may be some mechanism to reduce that probability. And it's also important for risk assessment because right now, a lot of groups are using fire behavior model like a flame map, one of the most widely used map. And usually you would need to initiate where ignition starts or how many ignitions you want to start your simulation, right? So it's always needed to have some more realistic ignition data or understanding how ignition started across different landscapes to drive those models. And at larger scale, like a coupled fire climate model, we also need to better simulate this ignition as a first step for fire simulation. And the data set we used is from Karen Short's ignition database. And a lot of previous studies focused on fire data set from like a FRAP, fire parameter. And those data sets only have records for relatively larger fires, either greater than 50 acres or greater than 100 acres. And with Short's database, because it's focused more on ignition points, it actually includes a lot of tiny fires that have been put out and therefore didn't end up in many fire parameter database. If you look at a straight comparison between number of ignitions across years for the whole state of California with the number of fires captured in the FRAP database, as we can see, for fires greater than 100 acres, both data sets are great reasonably well, especially for lightning-caused fires. And we did see ignition database covered like a much more small fires, especially in the earlier, like the 90s. So with this data set, it covers all the ignition points from 1992 to 2015, over 14 years record. We've seen about 10,000 ignitions per year across the state. So it's actually pretty scary number when I first calculated. And we also found that human-caused ignition accounting for 86% of total ignition, and lightning-caused ignitions only accounting for like 30%, and mostly located at a higher elevation. And if you look at the human-caused ignition, there's a clear spatial pattern. Majority of them were very close to human settlement. I calculated that about 35% of total human-caused ignitions are located within WUI area. And roughly on average, we've seen 1 ignitions per square kilometer at a decadal time scale. And if you move a little bit further away from WUI area, like within 2 kilometer buffer, we've seen another 35% of ignitions occurring over there. And further away, another 2 kilometer buffer, we've seen 10%. So basically within WUI and adjacent 4 kilometer buffer area, like more than roughly 80% of total human-caused ignitions occur over there. And you can kind of see the spatial pattern. A lot of ignitions are along the major highways and some like a heavy traffic road. And you can see some of the linear features from the observed number of ignition points from the SHORTS database. And but that's all like a visual interpretation, right? You can get some sense of the spatial patterns of human-caused versus lightning-caused ignitions. And in order to understand what are the factors driving those patterns and how future population change, human settlement change, or climate change will affect the ignition probability, we really need to build a more quantitative models to mimic these processes and also to project to the future. So to do that, we used a widely used species modeling approach called maximum entropy approach. We take multiple environmental drivers, including a lot of human factors, population, human settlement, road, and we also take the lightning count from NOAA lightning strikes database. And for fuels, we include a lot of fuel layer, including vegetation cover, fuel model, fuel type, and from landfire database. We also use satellite derived vegetation index as an index of fuel amount to drive this model. And weather is another important input. We take PRISM, temperature, precip, VPD at 4 kilometer, and also the some fire weather related variables, for example, wind speed and ERC burning index, all those variables from GridMat dataset, also at 4 kilometer. And topography is more, like a static layer. And for the response variable, we use the SHORT database to sample the presence grid cells based on the ignition density. And what the model does, it can create the probability distribution and find out the suitable conditions for ignition occurrence. And we did separate model for human caused ignition and lightning caused ignitions. In general, the model performed pretty well, and the AUC number is around 0.9. And typically, if AUC value is around 0.75, we consider it's a relatively useful model, because if you predict ignition based just a random guess, AUC would be around 0.5. So with 0.9, we are pretty confident the model can do a pretty good job capturing the spatial patterns of ignition. And here, this map, I'm showing you the predicted ignition probability at 4-kilometer resolution for the whole state of California. And as you can see, the spatial pattern matches pretty well with what we observed from the SHORTS database. And we see higher probability around human settlement and also along the major road. And for the lightning cost ignition, again, the spatial pattern at higher elevation is where captured by our model prediction. And with the model diagnostics, we can also look at what are the key environmental drivers that contribute into the spatial patterns. For human caused ignitions across the state, we found population, human modification are the primary drivers as expected. And fuel amount, as indicated by Lancet and DVI, it's just it's still significant, but overall only contributing around like 2%. In contrast, for lightning caused ignitions, we've seen major control from elevation and fuel amount, as indicated by NDVI, and also summer precipitation. And lightning has a big impact on lightning caused ignition. That's pretty intuitive. And we look at the individual impact, the impact of individual variable on ignition. For example, human modification is one of the dominant factors. And on the right, I'm showing you a map of human modification, which is an integrated variable accounting for all kinds of human modification, including settlement, roads, and power line, all those things considered. As you can see, like for areas with larger human modification, we see much higher ignition probability. I should mention that for our model, we masked out like a pure urban center. So that's why in this response curve, you didn't see that drop in terms of ignition probability. And for lightning caused ignitions and the lightning count, the density is the like a very straight relationship. Higher lightning count, you get higher number of ignitions, right? And elevation, we see it peaks around mid elevation, around 2,000 kilometer areas. And we saw a very positive relationship between fuel amount, as indicated by Lancet and DVI, with ignition probability. So what it says is the more fuel you have, you get higher ignition probability for, at least for lightning caused ignitions. They most occur at relatively mountainous areas. And if we zoom into individual regions, and we can see many other localized drivers. Sometimes for human caused ignitions, we'll see impact of fuel-related variables and or weather-related variables. For example, in North Coast, population is the primary driver, and major roads also a significant variable. As you can see, like around the road, you'll see higher ignition density. And lightning cost, again, in addition to lightning count, elevation, we also see impact of summer precipitation and vapor pressure deficit controlling the ignition probability. In Sierra Nevada region, population is still the dominant, but accounting only for like 40% of ignition variation comparing to other statewide or other regions. And we did see summer burning index and summer precipitation became more important in this area. And in Southern California, again, it's mostly human dominated landscape, at least especially closer to the coastal areas, and human modification is very important, and some of the elevation, summer precipitation also became important variables. And yeah, I went back to look at the results from our previous study that focused more on the Southern California. That one only used FARSITE, which is a Forest Service ignition database. It's mostly focusing on Forest Service land. And for that study with different models, we found similar results. And again, proximity to roads and housing are the primary driver for human-driven ignition over there. And overall, we've seen more than 75% of ignition occurred within 5 kilometers from housing and 60% of ignition within 1 kilometer from major roads. So I think the main take-home message for ignition patterns is human ignited fires are pretty dominant across the state, and we saw predominantly impact from human settlement modification on spatial patterns of ignition. We did see some impact from the fuel amount and also some weather variables in summertime on ignition probability. So that's the first piece of the whole fire studies ignition. And the next one is once the fire started and how fast they will grow, and that's again depending on a lot of factors. We have fuels and weather on top of topography. In the past, there are quite a few studies actually looking at individual fires and to see how weather or fuels affect fire progression at daily time scale. And we have thousands of fires you can dive into and look at a daily time scale, how fire grow. For example, the most recent lightning complex fire in Northern California, if you link that with weather observations from the close by Ross weather station, we can get the idea like the heat wave, right? Higher temperature coupled with like a relatively low humidity and also wind gust is pretty much drove this very fast progression of the fire in the first few days. Similarly for campfire, we saw like a similar weather condition, wind coupled with high temperature, relative humidities. So there are a lot of fires that we can look at this association between fire growth and weather. The problem is in order to extrapolate those knowledge from individual fires to larger area, we really need to do a more synthesized studies, right? We need to pull all fire together, look at daily fire spread and all the associated environmental layers to figure out what are the relative importance of fuels or weather in determining the rate of spread. And those information are very important for fire management because the dominance of those factors may vary from region to region or from fire regimes, right? And for areas that are predominantly wind-driven or weather-driven, then you need to think twice in terms of fuel thinning and think about where you should place your fuel thinning project to optimize your investment, right? And it's also important for risk assessment if you can predict how fast fire will grow given ignition and weather conditions, fuel conditions. And so that's kind of the motivation for our study over here. And we look at all large wildfires across the state since 2012. And because this is the time period that we have satellite observations of active fires from both MODIS sensor and VIIRS sensor, so it can give us more detailed information on the daily or sub-daily timescale, how fire spread across the landscape. And overall, we have updated all the fire record up to mid-September this year. We have about 454 fires across the state that are larger than 200 hectares. And these fires covers a diverse landscape, ecosystems, and also covers a few extreme fire years and a few normal fire years. So we think this will capture a broad range of fire behaviors across the state. The main data we are relying on is this derived daily fire parameter from satellite observations. One of my graduate student, Eric Scadudo, has developed an automatic workflow which takes the active fire detection, basically individual fire points, detected from space, from MODIS and VIIRS. We combined this two data source and then did a natural neighbor interpretation to get it more continuous daily fire parameter. And then she did some vectorization and simplify some of the topology. And at the end, for each individual fire, we can map out fire front for each individual day. And from there, we can derive rate of spread at different directions. And so this is basically the base we are using for building our models for rate of spread. And yeah, so we look at the regional rate of spread characteristics and found that like northern coastal areas, southern coastal areas, and Klamath Mountains, surprisingly, have had relatively fast-moving fires, and typically they have on average 1.5 thousand hectares burned per day, and on average, daily mean fire spread average over all directions is roughly about 2 kilometers per day for those areas. But in contrast, Sierra Nevada, we have seen much slower spread of fires. And here we can also look at how many days it takes for each particular region or each particular fires to reach 75% of total cumulative area burned for each individual fire. What we found is Klamath and Sierra Nevada, majority of fires actually took more than 7 days to reach 75% of cumulative area. In contrast, the northern coast and southern coast areas, it only takes like 1 or 2 and less than 3 or 4 days to burn the majority of total area burned. And yeah, if you take a straight univariate correlation between this derived daily fire spread in terms of total acre burned on a daily basis or rate of spread in terms of magnitude, like kilometer per day, with a lot of we look at 23 individual variables, and it varies from region to region, but most often we'll see like a weather, a lot of weather variables, maximum wind speed. This one we actually use ROS, weather station wind speed, and like a highly positively related. And we have seen some other fire weather index, highly correlated. And for some areas, for example, Cascade and Sierra Nevada, we also see some like a fuel information became important. And this gave us like a first order understanding what are the inferential variables controlling fire spread. But as we all know, it's very complicated process. There are a lot of interaction between individual variables. So we used gradient boosting machine learning models, trying to predict the daily area burned and also rate of spread, using all the input variables that we gathered to quantify fuels, weather, terrain, and we added another human-related factor called travel distance from Cal Fire, which is basically captured the accessibility to like a firefighting facilities, or how long take for you to get to a particular fire area to put out the fires. And we link that with our response variables. So gradient boosting models, it's kind of like creating an ensemble decision trees and in an additive sequential manner. The advantage comparing to traditional random forest is this gradient boosting actually it's more robust because it can take subsamples of a training data, and at each node, you can select a subsample of your features. And for each following trees, we are trying to reduce the correlation between individual trees. So at the end, you get a lot of trees which are less correlated, and the final model is actually a integrated result from these multiple trees. So it's more robust machine learning models for the prediction. And again, we can look at the feature importance and the partial dependence of fire rate of spread on individual variables, assuming all the other variables are fixed. And it's a very powerful tool to disentangle these complex interactions between multiple variables. And in general, this model can capture about 87% of variance in daily area burned, and the performance for predicting the daily mean rate of spread is a little bit lower than daily area burned, but still it can capture around 66% of a rate of spread. And with the model, we can quantify how much contribution each group of features or variables contributing to this spatial temporal of variability in daily fire spread. What we found is overall across the state, over all this fire day incidents, we found weather factors such as vapor pressure deficit, wind speed, almost contribute a third to the variation in the rate of spread. And additional condition from weather also reflected in the fuel condition. That's additional controlling factors. And fuel structures we found roughly almost equally important as weather factors in determining the rate of spread across the state. And topography has a small amount of contribution, followed by human factors. So that's give you like a general idea across the state how much influence weather or fuels had on the past daily rate of spread. And we can also look at individual ecoregions. And here it's more like a condensed decision tree explainers based on sharply additive explanation metrics. It's not that intuitive, but you can think about the red, and it's more like if certain variable pass that threshold listed here, it'll increase your rate of spread. For example, so like for northern coastal sage, we see maximum wind speed if it's crossing the threshold of 22 miles per hour. it'll increase your rate of spread significantly. And the length of this bar here shows the the magnitude of influence. And we also see annual NDVI is pretty significant, and some other force-back weather index, vapor pressure deficit, those important negative, positive impact, but less influence comparing to maximum wind speed and NDVI. So this is more like a very condensed analysis for variable contribution. And for Sierra Nevada, we see travel cost has some impact over there, and more like a fuel impact over there. And we can also look at how each individual variable affects rate of spread. And here, I'm showing you for northern coastal sage, we picked the two dominant factors based on our previous analysis. So maximum wind speed, as you can tell, it increases the rate of spread significantly, right? And on the second dimension, NDVI, the darker color shows higher NDVI. You can kind of see on top of wind speed, if you also have like a higher amount of fuels, and your rate of spread will be enhanced as well. And for Sierra Nevada, we saw the fuel types, like a percentage of shrubs actually had a very positive impact on rate of spread, as we can kind of expect it. And also the wind speed further enhanced the rate of spread. And so those are the results from our ongoing work. And I wanted to link back to the studies we did a couple of years ago in Southern California, looking at fire behaviors caused by strong wind-driven Santa Ana wind events, and comparing that with typical summer fires driven by more hot and drier air in the summertime. And as you can see, there's the massive wildfires. Those are all the records from 59 to 2009, so almost like 5 decades of fire record in Southern California. And yeah, with the high resolution climate data generated by Professor Alex Hall at UCLA, we were able to identify individual Santa Ana days based on wind data. And then we separate fires into those coincident with Santa Ana events. We call it Santa Ana fires, and other non-Santa Ana driven fires mostly happen in summer times. In general, those two types of fire, they actually burned similar amount of total areas, although Santa Ana fires, we have a small number of fires comparing to typical summer fires, but because of their extreme large fire size, they ended up burning similar amount of area burned. And if we look at the conditions or locations that are associated with Santa Ana fires, we actually found there's a very clear distinction in terms of where they're located for Santa Ana fires versus summer fires. If you look at the image over here, and in the background is the fire weather index averaged over those 5 decades, only over Santa Ana days that we identified. And here I'm showing you fire weather index. As you can tell, it's a very severe fire weather for all those Santa Ana fires that occurred in the past 5 decades. And typically they are located in those canyons with strong wind events. And in contrast, the summer fires mostly located further inland. And if you overlay fire location with the fire weather index, long-term mean over the summertime, and you'll see the fire weather index is much lower than those values in Santa Ana events. And all those summer fires actually located in more like a inland area with relatively higher vapor pressure deficit in terms of spatial patterns. And that's related with all those onshore winds in summertime. And the fire behaviors, we also derived, like at individual fire scale, we can derive the mean spread rate, because we know the final fire parameter, right? We can find the major axis predominant fire progression direction, and we know how long the fire lasted. So we can calculate the direction and also magnitude of mean spread rate, as you can see from here. So this is a statistic from all the fires in last 5 decades in Southern California, Santa Ana fires. We will see the warmer color shows like a much higher spread rate for Santa Ana fires, usually around, a lot of them around more than 1 kilometer per hour in that area. And the direction is also more like moving toward coastal areas, right? And in contrast, the summer fires, the spread rate is much lower, typically lower than 1 kilometer per hour. And they are more propagating toward inland area to the east. And yeah, if you look at the spread rate in terms of hectares per hour, Santa Ana fires also burned much larger areas comparing to non-Santa Ana fires during this individual 4 snapshots of satellite overpassing time. And intensity, Santa Ana fires are have much higher intensity, as you can tell from this bar plots over here. So that's this like contrasting fire behaviors from this wind-driven Santa Ana fires versus non-Santa Ana fires in summertime, actually causing the disparities in terms of structure damage, because we've seen like much higher magnitude order in terms of structure damage by Santa Ana fires, because they are moving very fast toward the residential areas in the west, and it's really hard to put out, and eventually resulting much more structure damage. And we also look at the role of fuels in fire risk for both Santa Ana fires and non-Santa Ana fires. We found that the fuel amount using like a stand age as an indicator, the higher fuel amount actually promoted the fire probability for summer fires, as you see the green bar over here. But for Santa Ana fires, the stand age or fuel amount actually doesn't have much impact on fire probability across the region. Another aspect we look at is figuring out what stopped the fire growth, right? We look at the fuel condition, fuel structure around the final fire parameter and calculate the effectiveness of potential fuel barriers, for example, non-flammable land cover, really young stands or rows or ridge, and for those actually are more effective in stopping fire to grow for non-Santa Ana fires. But for Santa Ana fires, it's less effective. So this imply that fuel thinning or fuel breaks, all those actions may be more effective for reducing fire spread for non-Santa Ana fires, but presumably will be less effective in extreme Santa Ana fires. And let me see, I think I have a couple of minutes, and I'll just go over quickly for another studies that we recently published in terms of another aspects dimension of wildfires. That's like a severity, fire severity in northern coastal areas. And as we know, severities are also an important attribute for fires, because high severe fires, you'll destroy more vegetation and expose areas to more erosion risk, and also like more damages for housing or the other ecosystem services. So we focused on northern coastal mountains. The reason we chose this area is actually because we were approached by BLM when they started established Bereza Snow Mountain National Monument, and so they really want to know what's the fire risk in general in the area. So we picked this study area, and later on we found out this is actually turns out a very interesting area. As we see in 2017, we had a huge firestorm in Napa counties, and again, this year, we have seen quite a few large fires destroyed lots of buildings over there. And it's a pretty diverse landscape. We have a mixed shrubs, grassy fields, and also some hardwood forest, conifer forest at a relatively higher elevation. And for this area, we have seen like a consistent increasing trend in terms of total area burned, like increasing by 800 hectares per year since 1984, mostly caused by larger fire size. And we were wondering, what about severity of burns? Because on average, we have seen like about 36% of total area burned in the area experienced a high severity burn. But what about the climate conditions, like would drying climate or warmer climate how would that amplify the severity of burn in the region? So we kind of like focused on a few climate conditions. We look at dry versus wet years. And within the dry years, we look at two different prolonged dry period, and recent 2012 to 2016, we have seen drought and also warmer temperature, right? And for previous 1987 to 92 drought, it was relatively cooler. So we look at the differences of burn severity over area burned during those different climate conditions. What we found is drought intensified fire severity. For example, during the dry years, we've seen 47% of total area burned were associated with like a high severity of burns. And in contrast, in wet years, there was only 20% of total area burned with high severity. So that indicating the drought amplified the fire severity. And if you compare the recent warmer drought with previous relatively cooler drought, we found that higher temperature actually further amplified burn severity, like almost double the percentage of high severity burns. So as you can tell, this is a relative DMBR, a widely used metric for burn severity from satellite. So this is a distribution of RDMBR for all the burned pixels during the wet years, and dry years you see much higher, right? And also the percentage of high severity burns increased during the dry years, further amplified by higher temperature. And we then moved into a more like a modeling approach, trying to predict the burn severity at each 30-meter pixel size using a range of environmental drivers and a lot of satellite derived input data to characterize fuel amount and fuel condition, like moisture index. And we have lots of long-term and short-term weather climate data incorporated, and also fire history, like years since last fire. And overall, the random forest model can capture 79% of the variation in terms of categorical severity, like high, moderate, or low severity, and regression model to predict continuous RDMBR, like we can capture 67% of a variability. And we also found the burn severity actually shaped by a mixed effect of topography, long-term temperature, climatic water deficit, and fuel characteristics, because this model actually captured both spatial, like all the 30 megapixels, and also temporal across the years, right? So it's really a lot of a mixing effect from different factors. But in dry years, we do see temperature had an increasing impact on fire severity. And during wet years, we saw a stronger relationship with climatic water deficit, both long-term and also short-term deficit. And yeah, again, we found that pre-fire fuel amount enhanced severity of burn, and moisture index. The drier fuels, you have like a higher severity as expected, and the slope elevation also has impact on those. And we actually did a prediction for this fire season when the Northern California experiencing those like very severe fires, like driven by those dry lightning. We updated all the input layers and did a prediction of burn severity for like a larger region in the Northern California. And that was assuming there was fire in that area, what would the severity would be, right? So we have prediction of probability for high severity burns, probability for moderate, probability for low severity burns. So if you composite these three probabilities together, this is what this map shows. So the warmer color pretty much showing like a higher probability for high severity burns. And it's interesting to find out a lot of this year's fires actually located in those areas that we predict with relatively higher severity based on the updated weather input, fuel input. So it was pretty interesting to see. And yeah, so in summary, we found the dominant impact of humans on ignition probability, and this large-scale data analysis improved our understanding of relative importance of fuels, weather, topography, and humans on a rate of spread, and also on the severity of burns. And one take-home message is this data-driven machine learning models can allow us to do near real-time estimate for ignition probability, rate of spread, and also probability of high severity, right? Based on your updated input layer, we can also do future projection for all these different aspects of fire behaviors in the future. And yeah, it also provides us some insights through this modeling analysis, help us to identify where most vulnerable areas are located across the state. And this will help us to design more localized fire mitigation strategies, right, in terms of land use planning and fuel management, factoring into some of the extreme weather impact. So with that, I'll just stop here and quarantine my funding sources and a lot of collaborators listed over here. Yeah, I'll just stop here. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for a great talk. We have quite a bit of questions on the Q&A, so I'll start reading them out in the order that they came in. The first question comes from Agnes, and she asked, they asked, do you consider the fires ignited by PG&E human cost?
Yes, I would think so. But unfortunately, in the database, it won't specifically call out, is it due to downed power line or those specific causes. And I think a FRAP dataset actually has some attributes. Some fires stay flagged due to downed power line, but the limitation is that attribute is not complete. So you may see a few fires flagged as caused by downed power line, but it's hard to do a quantitative analysis without a complete attribute for the causes. So I would consider it's human cost because it's a infrastructure related, right, cost.
Thank you. We have a question from Kuldeep. They ask, they say, thank you for the presentation. And they ask for your thoughts on the application of data science and neural nets decision trees for wildland fires, and your thoughts on what do you think machine learning can make as far as a large impact, I assume, in the field, and what are the potential products and stakeholders that could benefit from this?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. And in the past, I think, at least for me, I was pretty much relying on a lot of traditional statistical approach, right? Like linear regression, logistic regression, and stepwise, and many other algorithms. But with like a fire behavior studies, because of the complexity, and it's really hard to like quantify the impact from individual variables, right? And then nowadays we have this huge amount of data sets available to quantify both fuels, right, at very fine resolution. 30 meter is widely available. And we have like on the fire characteristics side, as I mentioned, we have a lot of satellite-based observation, which can help us monitor at daily time scale how they were progressing, right? And also like weather, climate data becoming getting toward like much higher resolution. It can help us resolve some of the local like topography related wind events. So I think with this large amount of data, traditional statistical approach has its own limitations, and that's where a lot of machine learning based approach are very helpful in terms of both from the predictive purposes and also for trying to understanding what sort of conditions, combination of conditions led to like a very fast moving fires or high severity burns, right? And so that's a very powerful tools from the research purpose and from the operational purpose. I think from the stakeholders point of view, I think I would expect in the near term, we should have something available once those models are built, tested, and we can ingest a lot of input data to do like a near real-time prediction for ignition probability, rate of spread, and also for like a twin future projection, right? So I think that it will be more like a location-based and varies from region to region, right? So I do see lots of values for this data-driven machine learning or AI-based approach, because I think we do use a lot of mechanistic based fire models, but it's computationally it is expensive as well, and it's relatively hard to apply across the state, right? A lot of those are like super high resolution physics based fire model is just very expensive to, if you want to get really fast results, imagine on the ground firefighting tactics, right? You really need to get something really fast. So that's my general thought on that.
Thank you for that answer. We're almost all out of time, and we have quite a few more questions to go. So we'll carry them over to the extended discussion, And the link to the extended discussion can be found on the chat right now. So if you go there, you'll be able to get the link and sign on. I'd like to, at this point, thank Dr. Yufang Ying for this presentation and for her time and for sharing such an interesting portion of her work. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks.